Hello and welcome to the Lechuga channel, where I like talking about literature among other things. So today I figured I would go over all of the books I have read recently and just give my basic thoughts on them. I don't really have a lot to say about each of these books individually, so I might as well group them up and talk about them more generally. Consider this a sort of book journaling of all the books I've read as of late. So up first, we have very popular one this is. It's a little book called The Lord of the Rings. So I have been trying to get through the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the last 3 or so months-ish. I started in like November. I started reading The Fellowship in November. You know, I figured it'd be like, oh hey, it's like the movie, oh Frodo, oh Gollum, and I got Gandalf there too. No, it wasn't like that at all. I want to make it clear when talking about these books that I am actually a fan of both the books themselves and the man behind them. I am genuinely in awe over all of the things that Tolkien managed to do in his lifespan. Like, not only did he write Lord of the Rings, which is one of the most beloved stories of all time, but I'm also impressed because Tolkien wrote a whole ass world and lore and narrative. It's all extremely impressive, especially if you read the Silmarillion, which I did, which is basically copyrighted mythology. And that's really what made me stick with Tolkien throughout all 3 books and the Silmarillion and the Hobbit. It's just the fascination with the world and the lore and everything going on. Because if I'm being completely honest, the book by itself isn't super entertaining / I didn't know what the fuck was happening half the time. I'd say the one thing that really put me off from Tolkien's writing is how absurdly confusing it is. This is a book that was written in the 1950s, and because of that, Tolkien uses a very of-the-time writing style that, in my opinion, doesn't really hold up today. There's a lot of random monologuing. The characters use old-timey English. Frodo will walk by a tree, and then Tolkien will spend 3 pages giving you the whole-ass backstory of the goddamn tree. Combine this with the fact that by the time you get to the 2 Towers and the Return of the King, there are so many characters and subplots and things going on and monologues to explain things that already happened and things that happen off screen that are suddenly relevant. I had to reread a whole ass pages multiple times just so that I could kind of get the basic idea of what was happening. And that really killed a lot of the enjoyment I could have had from the book. Though I do understand how some people might like it because of it. Like I said, I think the story is fantastic. I think the world is spectacular. I just wish it was written in a more palatable way. And that's when you take the books by themselves. I haven't seen them in a while, but I do remember a lot of the key plot points from the Lord of the Rings Peter Jackson movies. And the difference is pretty considerable in the amount of enjoyment you'll get out of it. Peter Jackson really knew how to take a lot of scenes from the book and give them the impact that they deserve. Like, really focus in on the big moments. Like, you know, in Return of the King, when he's fighting the Lord of the Nazguls, and then he's like, oh, no man can kill me. And then Eowyn takes off her helmet, all badassness, like, I am no man. And then she stabs him and he fucking dies. Pretty badass, right? Well, in the book, the same scene happens, but instead of just saying, I am no man, super cool and all, well, instead of that, in the book, we get this long-winded monologue about how she is Eowyn, the daughter of Elrond, and will defeat the Lord of the Nazgûl because that is her destiny, and I am going to defeat you now. And it's like, bruh, just stab him already. And stuff like this happens all the time, so if you've already seen the movies and you go into the books, it kind of creates a bit of a contradiction in your head. I don't know. I still think the books are most certainly worth reading. They're still extremely confusing, and I think the movies are still a much better way of experiencing these stories in a more like modern format. But overall, if you're a huge fan, then obviously you should check them out. But I think if you just want to get the idea of what happens, just watch the movies. Though of course I still have to acknowledge the amount of effort and work that went into these books by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I have huge respect for the man after having gone through all of his work. Okay, so up next I have a very obscure book that I highly doubt most of you care about, but I do, so let me be. And that is a book called The Psychology of Final Fantasy, edited by Anthony M. Bean, PhD. That part's very important. So as the title implies, this book is a collection of essays by a variety of psychologists who look at various Final Fantasy games and give their own take on the story or the gameplay or the music, what have you, from the perspective of psychology. Of course, this book heavily interested me personally because I am a gigantic fan of Final Fantasy. The original Final Fantasy VII has one of the greatest stories ever told in my opinion. When I first played that when I was like 12 years old, it absolutely blew my mind. So much so that even here in my desk I have the original copy staring at me whenever I record. So of course I was more than interested in seeing what all of these psychologists had to say about the series. If I'm being completely honest, the book is kind of what you expect it to be. There are 12 essays, and these 12 essays can be divided into 3 different types. There are the best ones, which are the ones that give a very unique perspective on these games. They give you this insight that you probably haven't thought of before and a really fresh take on the games. So much so that after I was done reading them, I was like, wow, I feel like I learned something new and appreciate the games more. Then in the middle, you have the essays that, aren't really saying anything. They're just kind of pointing out the obvious. Like, for example, there's one that says that, the villains in Final Fantasy want to destroy the world because they don't believe in life. And it's like, well, okay, no shit. These are generally inoffensive, but they're somewhat common, and oftentimes I felt like the takes that were in these books were things that I could probably find in some video essay on YouTube, like some game theory video. Except in a game theory video, at least those are like really entertaining. This is just, text on paper. And then at the bottom of that, you have the essays that heavily misinterpret what these games are about and make you question if the person behind them actually played the games. They mostly consist of people who have, in my opinion, some pretty terrible takes on the games, and it's clear that they don't really understand them or are coming at it from an outsider's perspective. And because of that, it doesn't really feel like they get what these games are about. Of course, nothing against the people who actually worked on this. I am very happy that something like this exists and that actual professional psychologists are taking a look at video games of all things for ways of looking into psychology and human nature and whatnot. In general, I'd say I'd enjoyed it, especially as a huge fan of Final Fantasy, but at the same time it's a really hard book to recommend because if you haven't played most of the games, then you probably won't really get a good idea of what's happening. There's only one game they talk about here that I haven't played, which is Final Fantasy 13, and I was a little lost in that one. And I also can't help but feel like video essays on YouTube are generally more entertaining and give you a lot of the same takes you see in the psychology of Final Fantasy. But hey, if you're a fan of the series and you like reading books, this one's pretty short, it's pretty inoffensive, might as well check it out. If I had to say, you should at least play Final Fantasy 6, 7, 9, and 10, as those are the ones they focus on the most. They're also the best ones, so definitely check those out. So those are all the books I've read as of late. However, I will likely be making videos on some of the books I'm currently reading. So if you're curious about that, I am currently reading a few books. There is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which, yes, I am still reading this one. I'm taking my time with it, but I really like it because it's made for gamers. So hey, if you want to read this one while I read it as well, then hey, you'll be ready for when I make the next video. I am also listening to the audiobook for the memoir Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. Anyway, I just started it. Pretty good so far. I'll let you know my full thoughts when I finish it. And while I haven't started it yet, I might read a book called The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo soon. I don't know, it's really popular. I might as well check it out. So if you want to check any of those out, I'll likely be making videos on them soon, so you'll be ready for them. Well, that's going to be it for this video. What are some of the books you've read in January, or just books you've read in general as of late that you want to talk about? Let me know in the comments below and tell me what you thought about them too. And hey, while you're there, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the Lechuga channel for more literary content. And hey, if you like this video, why not watch another one? I have a playlist on screen right now with all of my book related content. Well, that's going to be about it. See ya.